Hello, during today's session, you are going to learn what is a Python function and how to implement its syntax. So let's go to share the screen. And now here we are on PyCharm. So as per you can see here, we have a couple of comment lines before I start working with the function structure or the function example. So let's go to that. For the first line, we have what is a Python function? And the answer is that a function is a block of organized, reusable code that is used to perform a single related action. Also, it's mentioned that functions provide a better modularity for our applications and a high degree of code reusing. Finally, a function is a block of code which only runs when it is called. Now, let's just to clarify these comments or this information with the next syntax. As per you can see here, first of all, the syntax is composed of the div keyword followed by the function name. We need to give one name at our function. Use opening and closing brackets to include one input. That means in this part, we can name in some specific, well, we could use one specific name. And when we call our function, we could pass one parameter. We can pass one parameter to that input so that we could use in our block or next expressions. Then we have the colon and we pass to the next line. In this line, we're going to include the actions to be performed or the block or expressions. But here we need to pay attention because as per you can see here, we have one indentation. That means this blank space that we keep by following this kind of how say that of format, because we have def, then we have function name. But if we go to the next line is start from where the function name start, right? And then the return also follow this sequence. So we are just keeping this blank space or indentation. And finally, we have the output, which will be the variable that we want to call in order to return our final result or value from this function which is executed. Then let's go to one function example so that we could clarify even more what we have explained on these previous lines. But before, let's just comment what we have just seen. Just 1 second. Let's just comment until this part. Then let's just before I start working in our syntax, let's clarify the case, the use case. For this, it says that we want to add one given number. That means one given number or one parameter that we could pass at our function to the 3 integer number. And finally, we want to print that result in our console. That means the result for that addition will be displayed in this section in the console. Now, first of all, we need to define our function. For that, we are going to follow up the previous syntax explained, and we are starting with the div keyword as per we saw in our syntax. Then we have assigned one name for that function, the function name. For that, I just use the adding number 1 because I think that is easier to follow up this function name because it makes sense. Then I have assigned one input. See, we have the opening closing brackets, the input. I just name num1 because it makes sense to the function name, adding num1. Then I just finalize the first line with the colon, and I start to work in my block expressions or next actions to be executed. So the action that is going to be executed, and according to the case, here, remember, we want to add this number, the pass number or the parameter pass here to the input number one, num1, 2, 3 integer number. Here we have +3. And this obviously needs to be stored in some place. In this case, it's going to be stored in our local variable at number1, because it makes sense we're adding num1, 2, 3 integer value. And finally, we have the return keyword, as per we saw here, return keyword, and the output. The output in this case will be this local variable, because it's where I'm storing what I want to know. What I want to know, remember, is the result of this addition of the num1, the number that I have passed, or the parameter, plus 3 integer that was stored here. And I want to know that, so I just return or call this variable. That number is called here. Now, until this part, we have already defined, first of all, our function, and what do we want to do with that function, right? But in order to execute all this block, what is required, first of all, is call our function and pass this input. That's mean to pass this parameter. So the way that we will do this is, first of all, creating one variable. The name that I have just given to that variable is var init storage. And I use this name because of the example that, according to the example that I'm covering in this moment, I want to clarify that we are using this same variable for two specific actions. The first is because with this variable, as per I said, we are going to call our function and pass the number that we want to add to the 3 integer, right? But the second also is that we're going to use the same variable because we're going to use the same variable for a store. That's why I use the storage word for a store the result from all these function. That's mean after execute all that function, the result that we could get is going to be sent back or stored in the same variable that we use to initialize or call our function. So seeing this, let's just complete this variable. And remember, I just named because of that way, because it makes sense for me, just to help you to explain you and clarify what we are doing with this variable. So var init storage, it's equal to, well, first of all, we are calling at our variable. So we need to use the function name, sorry, we are calling our function. So in this case is adding number1, variable equal to adding number1. Second, remember, we need to pass the parameter. In this case, I will go for the 5 number. And what we're doing in this moment is, remember, calling this function or starting this function, passing the 5 number. That's mean replacing this parameter, this 5 integer, by this num1. And now what we're going to do is create this local variable equal to, remember, num1 it's equal to 5, because 5 came here and then passed here. 5 plus 3, that's mean 8. Now at number1, it's equal to 8. Next, we have the return keyword, and we assign the at number1. Remember, this variable has been assigned with the 8 integer value. That's mean what we are going to return, it's 8 number, right? And when we run or execute this function, that means that once that we start this function, we pass this parameter, we run this line, and then we run this line and gather the 8 number. We're going to pass or store or send back at the same variable that we use to start the function. That means the new value for bar init storage will be 8 integer. And in order to print and confirm that result in our console, we are going to use the print sentence, use opening and closing brackets, and type the name from our variable used to call our function and store our function result. That means print bar init storage. So let's start running this function and see what we have. See, as per you could see, we have the 8. Once more, remember, we create our function, we name that, we introduce one input. Well, in this case, we decide to use num1, or I decided. Then I create one local variable to store the addition from this number, which will be passed here, +3. And I return the value or from that variable, and I assign to the same variable that was used to start or call our function. That's why we printed that variable and we get the result. And that was 8. Now let's continue with other example. Let's see, for that case, I want to create one employee function. And for that function, I want to pass new employee names. And I want to display the name for that new employee so that we could confirm that has been already saved or sent to the database. I mean, this is a really projection, a big projection, but for now we want to see display the name that we have already passed in our console. So let's start with the div keyword. Then what we will have to do? Well, we have to assign one name at our function. We need to use a function name. In this case will be employee. Next, we have to create opening closing brackets and include one input. For that, what are we going to pass? Well, in that case will be an employee name, right? And finally, for this first line, we use the colon. Second, we need to keep the indentation, that means the blank spaces, and then type or create one local variable that we could use to store our employee name that will be passed. So for that, I will use the new employee equal, this is my local variable, equal to name, and then use the return keyword. And what do I want to return? Well, what I want to return is the employee name, the new employee name that has been already passed as parameter or sent as parameter. So what I want to type here, or what I need to type here, is new employee. I mean, until this point, we have already created our function, but remember, in order to start our function, pass a parameter and start executing line per line from our block is required. Well, is required to create our variable. So that will be variable equal to, well, the first thing that we have to do to call this function is to type the function name, employee, second, opening, closing brackets, because this is the syntax. And then we need to assign the value or the name for the employee that we want to pass as parameter so that we could use in our block or expression. So for that, I will use the name Peter name. Peter will be the new employee. So let's see, in order to see display in our console that we have already started or calling our function, and that the parameter, in this case, the new employee name has been already passed, and the code line has been executed. I need to use one simple print sentence and introduce the name from our, well, in this case, from our variable var, because remember that we are going to use this same var, first of all, to start or to call our function. But then after this last line, after return line, we're going to get the value, the content that is in this variable, and is going to be sent back or stored in our var. That's mean in our same variable that we use to call our function. So let's just run it. And as per you can see here, we have the Peter name. So I think that this is it. And just for a quick recap, remember, the way a function works is the next. First, we pass data. We have the data or parameters we pass at our function. And second, we execute everything. That's mean all the code or the block or expression that is after our function. We keep our indentation, and we returned the result in form of data. That's mean the content for that variable, which we are using after the return keyword. So I really hope that this information could be useful for you, and see you on next videos.